I have a client that I haven't done work for him in a while. Back in the day, I visited him and he's like, geez, I've got a terrible driver turnover problem and I don't know why. Well, one day when I was in his office, I actually had to use the bathroom and I had to go past the dispatch department. And his general manager was screaming at the top of
Just
his
dressing
lungs.
someone down.
And there was a group of drivers, kind of at the window kind
Yeah.
of a thing. And I went back to I said, I know exactly why you're losing drivers.
You're listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast with Ken Lucci of Driving Transactions and James Blain of PAX Training. Learn how you can build a thriving transportation business with real profits, repeat clients, and enterprise value. And now for your hosts, Ken and James.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Ground Transportation Podcast. My name is Ken Lucci from Driving Transactions. We are a financial analysis and M&A advisory service, and I am so happy to have my talented co-host
This poor guy
with
has
me,
to put up with me.
with James Blain from PAX Training. I've got to tell you, I've done a couple of solo episodes, and our producer, John, has been practically in tears. Number one, because I think they're that bad. And number two,
Tears of
because
joy.
he's missed you.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking to you today from a new office. We're a little bit bigger and brighter this year for 2026. And I thought we would talk about this episode, one of the first of 2026, the abysmal world we live in as it comes to customer service and, more importantly, hospitality. I feel confident that our industry could hit it out of the park compared to the other transportation alternatives if we focused and understood the difference between service and hospitality. Over the holiday break, I was telling you before we started the recording that I went to Best Buy. Don't bleep that out, John. They're not going to be a sponsor.
But Best Buy, if you do want to get it together and you do want to sponsor,
if you do, we
will help fix your problem.
I went into Best Buy because my iPad is old, and I stood there for 15 minutes, couldn't get anybody to help me, walked around to 2 to 3 different people, and they were too busy to help me. And, I see why people are going.
So hold on,
online.
Too busy with customers or too busy with Instagram?
No, couldn't even find them. The upfront, the cashier, the line was fairly big. And I said to the cashier, is there anybody working the floor? And it was like I was bothering her, like I asked her, who's outside getting the carriages out of the parking lot? I don't know. And then right before the holiday break, I had forgotten my buds at the house. So I said, you know what? It's going to be easier for me to go to Staples. I go to Staples. Of course, now everything, for fear of shoplifting, nothing is out front that's this expensive. And so it takes you 10 minutes to find someone. I found someone in the aisle next door, and she's like, well, I don't know anything about that. I'm like, and then I waited in line.
But did she at least end with, but let me get someone to help her, or is it just
that's
not my problem?
She didn't. And then after I did finally get a cheaper version of these, I stood in line, and I swear to you, I've been to real estate closings or purchased cars, and the transaction time has been less. It was incredible to me. So it got me thinking about, in our industry, how important it is for operators to understand that, number one, service is what we do, but hospitality is how we make people feel. And it costs us absolutely nothing to leave people with an unbelievable impression and feeling extremely positive about what we do. But do you share my concern that the state of customer service and hospitality is literally, it's worse to me. It's absolutely worse than right after the pandemic. It's gotten it right after the pandemic. I felt it was terrible because everybody's like, I can't find anybody to work. And you felt like saying, oh my God, I better not say anything at all, because getting my food in 20 minutes rather than not getting my food at all at a restaurant is a good idea. I mean, what do you think about the state of service and hospitality? And is it a way for us to differentiate and grow market share? compared to the other options that are out there?
I think it's just you. I think we have the best customer service here in the United States, the best ever. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I do have a T-shirt that says "Stay away from me, I'm a grumpy old bastard," but
No, look, here's the thing. I think regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what you're talking about, customer service has gone to crap, like across the board. I think retail and food service industry and probably the hotel industry are the ones where I see it day to day the most because I live on
yeah,
the road.
yeah.
I can tell you right now, I think the biggest thing that I am seeing across the board is that common courtesy is not common courtesy anymore. And I can tell you that I think we've seen a massive shift in culture of the country. And maybe this is global, but I was talking to someone the other day about hiring. And when I was taught about hiring, it was you need to be there 15 minutes early. You need to be dressed like you're interviewing for CEO, and
Sure.
you need to put everything behind it. And they were complaining to me that they had people that were showing up every day for their interviews, just looking like they always do. And they could care less and they're just going through the motions. And I think a lot of this is trickling down through every portion of society.
So you're saying that they're interviewing for jobs and they're not dressing up, right? They're just coming in off the street
If
like
they
their
even
regular
come
street
in.
clothes. Yeah, right.
Right?
Even
Like,
if they even show up.
coming out of COVID, I did a presentation at one of the shows. It was one of the opening sessions. And one of the things that we talked about was what we have seen happen is the number of no-shows, the way that things have shifted there is a canary in the coal mine of what's happening. Because if I've got to fight to get you into a job interview, right? And
Yeah,
I'm fighting to get job applicants. Now
yeah,
what we're seeing is the cream that's rising to the top is thinner and thinner and thinner.
right,
And what
right.
we see happen, and I see this happen all the time, is we are a butts and seats industry, but it's not just the transportation industry. Everyone has to have these job roles to fill. So when your best choice is getting thinner and thinner and thinner, you start having to say, well, we're still going to take like the top third, even if it's only the top 10% that's good. Now you're taking the top 30. So 20% of the people you hired, you wouldn't have hired before, but you're
You
desperate.
wouldn't even have looked at them. Now you're forced to.
Now, what are you going to do? Well, I got to fill the
Is it a
role.
permanent, in your mind, is it a permanent situation? And what can operators do about it?
So a couple things. So I think the single most important thing that you have to do is you have to view this as a self-weeding out culture. Look, I got to tell you, I don't care what business you have. If you have a large scale business, you're always going to have a certain set of apples that are rotten. Every harvest has the bad part
Sure,
of the harvest. But the
sure.
hardest part for any business owner is to go through that harvest and say, well, I'm going to draw the line here, because we start looking at now, well, if I don't have enough drivers, I can't fulfill trips, or I'd have to farm out, or I'd have to do this, I'd have to
Are
do
you
that.
saying lower your standards?
Hell no. I'm saying you have to raise your standards to a point where if it comes down to, I might not be able to do as many trips this year, but I know that every single trip I'm going to do is perfect. You will often have to see when, because here's what typically happens. Typically, life imitates business. So if you're anything like me, you have your office, you're working in your office, all that. If you don't once a year clean the clutter, like for me, spring cleaning is built in. Yeah, Ken, you got a whole brand new one. But for me, in the springtime and kind of this is where it starts for me. I'm looking at the business, I'm looking at my office, I'm looking at my personal life, I'm throwing stuff out, I'm evaluating how do we do, where we go. And so you almost always have to you're going to have a period of growth, and then you have to have a period of clean out. In our business, I'm the clean
Yeah.
out guy, right? Because here's what happens in 95% of businesses. There's a big boom in transportation. You hire a ton of people. We're getting them on the road as fast as we can. We got to meet the standard. We got to do all that. And then at some point, your number of accidents, your number of incidents, your number of problems spikes. And then that's when I get the call of, hey, James, we've been using packs, but we hired a bunch of people and we rushed them all through, and now we've got to do the training, and now you've got to come back and clean up. That's kind of the typical cycle that a lot of companies, a lot of people follow. What you have to keep in mind is you have to also do that with culture and with service and with expectation and everything else. And there's a lot of companies that let their service go to crap that don't come back and fix it. And I think the culture now that we're fighting is a national, if not a global culture of meh.
You know, you hit upon something and you took it really where I wanted to go with it. Because I'm not an operator, and because even though many of my clients think I am, I don't work 7 days a week. So I have, even though some of my clients think I do, and they'll
Yeah.
call you at 9 o'clock at night. I get to one of the clients the other day that we both know and love. He sent me a text message at 9:15, and the next day I called him back. He said, won't you go to bed early? I'm like, I was in bed at 8. I was in bed an hour before you sent me that text. Anyway, you're taking this where I wanted you to go. Because I have time, I am fascinated by reading entrepreneurial books,
Yeah.
especially on customer service, especially on success stories in the hospitality space. So obviously we're huge fans of the Ritz-Carlton. I did not realize that Chick-fil-A, when they had 1,000 stores, they had grown to 1,000 stores. The founder was worried because he went to a few stores and he's like, wow, service is a little rough.
Yeah.
They brought in the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz-Carlton created what Chick-fil-A calls their core four. Okay. And I didn't realize that. So it's make eye contact.
Yep.
It's smile, projecting warmth and friendliness.
Yep.
Speak enthusiastically. Stay connected with pleasure, going the extra mile by personalizing the experience. And you notice they always ask your first name, right?
Well, it's the most beautiful thing you can hear is your own name.
Right, exactly. And they always, so those are the four core. But you hit upon something, their broader company values. They brought in the Ritz-Carlton to overhaul their culture. And basically, they created an internal set of values. Serve, placing the guest and team members first. Better together, fostering teamwork. Purpose-driven, connecting daily work to creating a positive impact. Pursue what's next, adapt and innovate. Character and integrity are key. Building leadership through heart, grit, and mutual respect. And then excellence, providing the highest quality product and nourishment and service. When I read that they had brought in the Ritz-Carlton, it made sense to me because, let's face it, Chick-fil-A's got competition, right? Popeyes and, if you can call it that, Popeyes and KFC.
Especially on Sunday.
Right, exactly, because they've chosen not to be. So they've made the conscious decision as a company in a space that's very difficult to hire in to create a culture of high quality and to create those four core service elements, if you will. The other one that I recently talked about is I read a book called Setting the Table. I believe his name is Danny Meyer. Danny Meyer is a restaurateur, and he founded Shake Shack.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Setting the Table by Danny Meyer. And there's three core things. Service is what we do. Hospitality is how we make the customer feel. The team comes before the customer. And I felt this resonated with me because I think you and I have talked about this before. Operators that treat their chauffeurs badly, or perhaps dispatchers who treat their chauffeurs and CDLs badly. And in Setting the Table, Danny Meyer talks about the team comes before the customer. You have to treat them well in order for them to deliver the kind of service that you want. So always boost their morale, always increase or speak to their personal dignity. Things like publishing the schedule early, trying to accommodate people's schedules and time off. celebrate wins publicly, and bonus people out for going above and beyond. And he spoke of culture as a constant, gentle pressure, meaning continuing to reinforce best in class performance. So
Yeah.
you hit the nail on the head when you talked about culture, but I guess my question to you is how do operators look, we're facing unprecedented disruption and we've got more coming with autonomous vehicles, but Uber and Lyft are doubling down on getting our corporate clients. How can operators use the absolute horrible customer service and hospitality world that we're all experiencing worldwide? How can you be the bright spot in the day of the client? How do you do that?
Well, all right. So let's rewind for a second because you've kind of set a stage here that is really important because one of the things that a lot of these guys talk about, and you see it in the E-Myth, you see it in all these, is you have the owner, and then one day the owner comes in and they change a bunch of stuff, and then they leave, right? And then the new employee looks at the manager, is like, "Who the hell was that? Oh, that's the owner of the company."
And this is the latest idea.
Yeah, don't worry about all the stuff they said. We're just gonna keep doing what we're doing. All right. Everybody likes to think that's not their company. And that usually is every larger company that I visit. To the point, right? To the point where I've been on site with people, helping them develop a training. And somebody goes, "Hey, we're going to do this training on, we're going to help our customer service reps. I want you to just answer the phone. You're going to answer the phone like you normally do, just do your regular thing." And the person, "Hey, blah, blah, blah." They do the thing, they answer the phone. And the owner goes, "What the hell was that? What did you just do? I didn't teach. That's not how we do this." And the employee looks at them like they're on drugs. "Well, yeah, that's how I was taught. That's how we all do it." "What do you mean that's how you all do it?" "We're supposed to do it like this and this and this." The owner's disconnected. Why? Because at a certain point, you have to start delegating down and you can't micromanage. And the vision of what the owner of the company thinks is happening and what is actually happening on the front line
Two
no
different things.
longer line up. And look, in transportation, we love to think like, "Oh, this isn't rocket science. I give the guy the keys. I tell him to wear a suit, or, I send him in my Prevost. I have him get dressed. I put him in the bus, or, hey, this is a shuttle. It runs a fixed loop, or, hey, all you do is strap the wheelchair down." I don't care what industry vertical you're in. It doesn't change. Go ahead.
So wait a minute. What you're saying is people are not inspecting what they expect. They make an assumption that certain things are happening and they're not.
I think it's something different than that. I don't think it's that they're not inspecting what they expect. I'll give you a great example. I worked with my father-in-law for years and years and years. This is the man that we talk about all the time on the podcast, right? Completely different. He's in the ag industry. He has taught me more about entrepreneurship than probably any one person. But one of the things that I used to see him do a lot and that I try not to do is he has an expectation of how it's going to be done. He knows how he wants it done. He knows how it should be done, but he doesn't do a good enough job in communicating the exact expectation of how we do that. He comes in, he goes, "All right, you go step 1, you step 2, you step 3, you're step 4, you're done." And he breaks it down into like the 4 pieces he do it. This is a 20-step process, and he just did it in 4. And then he's like, "All right, it's not hard. You know how to do it." And he leaves. And then he comes back, and it's not done the way he wanted and expected it to be done. And I see that happen a lot, that we have this, I call it oversimplification. When you and I did that intensive for the TTA out in Boston, one of the things that I talked about in my session there was you have this point where you oversimplify things. So I remember when my kid came to me and he goes, "Hey, Dad, has an engine and a car work?" And I went, "Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. It's that easy." And he's like, "What? What do we mean?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the air comes in, the fuel comes in, the spark goes boom, and all of a sudden there's power." And he's like, "What?" "Dude, your engine has like 1,000 pieces in it." For me, it's easy to explain it like that because when I was a kid, I went to mechanic school. I wanted to grow up to be a mechanic, not where I landed, but for me, an engine is a really simple thing. But then my son goes, "Well, how do you capture the explosion? How do you time the explosion? Where does the air come in?" Well, now we got to talk about the whole intake track, and we got to, but the more time you spend on a topic, the more time you work on something, the simpler it becomes. I remember when I was learning how to play hockey, I was talking to a former ECHL player. This guy played hockey for a living. And I said, "Hey, can you tell me how to shoot the puck?" And he goes, "I don't know. You just get it on the stick and you just fling it in." To him, it's that easy, right? That's the whole thing. Well, how far back do you pull it? Well, where are your hands? Well, and now all of a sudden he's thinking about it. He's looking at it. He's figuring it out. We see the same thing happen in business. And so it's not necessarily they're not inspecting what they expect. A lot of times it's they've reached the point of oversimplification. They're not realizing that if you want something done, you have to systematize it. And Ken, I would love to get your opinion on this because I bet you see this all the time. But what I found is the companies that truly are able to scale to multiple cities and multiple locations.
Everything is a system.
It's a playbook. It's a systematized playbook. But that said, I have seen very, very, very many companies that are one big, huge location that are literally seat of the pants of the owner. But the problem is when you remove that owner, all of a sudden you have a plane that nobody else knows how to fly with the same level of complexity. And nobody, it'd be like if Boeing said, we've got this brand new plane, we've got 3 pilots that know how to fly it. They're just going to fly it for these airlines. We're never going to make a manual, and they're insanely complicated. That's what I see in business.
Listen, that's not just our industry. I'm convinced that it's pretty much all small business to a certain level. Sadly, I've seen many, I mean, when I say a certain level, I mean a certain number of transactions per day or per month and a certain amount of revenue. But I see companies that are way above that threshold where the owner is still doing everything, or they're focused on 2 or 3 things that are not a good use of their time.
Right.
Okay. So,
well, you talked about the guy that did the books, right? He was doing his own books. It's taking his whole life.
He was doing his own books Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and during primetime selling time. And he's wondering, he doesn't have time to go to MPI meetings, doesn't have time to go to the Chamber of Commerce, doesn't have time to go to the GBTA, and he wonders why his business isn't growing. From a perspective of customer service, I think you hit upon something that's pretty important. Secret shop your own company.
Oh, yeah.
Secret shop your own company, or have someone else, that knows what you do. Secret shop your company. Make it reservation. Customer service, I think, I hate to say it, I don't like using the term customer service. I like, as far as our industry, I like the term hospitality, because it is critically important that when you have so many modes and methods of competition, let's just take airport. I can drive myself. I can have my neighbor drive me. I can have a local taxi guy drive me, or TNC. Or don't forget the illegal operator that's on Facebook. To me, we have got to hit it out of the park on hospitality. And we've got to be able to prove that we're hitting it out of the park on hospitality. And when you ask the average operator, they'll say to you, "Oh, yeah, of course they're answering the phone this way." And you see it all the time. When you're standing there, it's just not happening. They're not using the name constantly. They're not asking for the name, right? Have you used our services before? No. Well, listen, you've come to the right place. Could I ask your first name? It's Ken. Can I use your first name, or do you prefer Mr. Lucci? No, Ken is fine. Ken, thank you so much for calling today. Tell me something. What did you do before this? Well, I used to use Uber, but I get tired of their surge pricing, or I've had a couple of scary drivers. Ken, a lot of people tell me that. You're going to love our service. You're going to love what we do. Tell me something. What time do you normally leave in the morning? 4 o'clock in the morning, I catch the 6 o'clock flight. We are early morning experts, Ken. We will be there 15 minutes beforehand. Do you need a wake-up call? Do you do that? Of course we will. I mean, there are so many operators that, as you said, they're lucky to have somebody in the seat, and they're just not at all. They're focusing on, oh my God, just get the job done on time. They're not keeping hospitality level scores. They're not talking about net promoter scores. They're not issuing reviews to every single client because they're kind of afraid of the results. And I think it's self-defeating. I think that we are treated so badly as customers across the board. You know, at this point, when back in the day, when if back in the day, if I wanted to be treated badly, I'd go to the DMV or the post office. Now I can't tell the difference between my local CVS and the damn DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles. So I
Look.
think
It's worse
opportunities
than
have,
that, Ken.
but I
It's
think
worse than
operators
that.
have an, I think operators have an opportunity to hit it out of the park and make customers feel special every day. I think that's a competitive advantage.
And the funny thing is, right? I can't speak for any other state, but Kansas has got their you know what together at the DMV. I made my appointment online. I had to renew my CDL. I went into the DMV. It got me literally 5 minutes in and out, renewed, eye exam, photo, everything. What business can get me out in 5 minutes now?
How many cars do they have in Kansas anyway? I mean, do they
I
not
believe
allow,
you mean I believe you meant to say trucks. How many trucks do they have? We all
right?
drive pickup trucks. My cowboy hat's sitting over there.
Do they have to register the farm equipment?
No. Farm use only. We're good. You don't have to register that.
Okay, cool. I should talk on the Eastern Shore. On the
Yeah.
Eastern
Yeah.
Shore, I'm lucky. I'm lucky if I go home and there's not a John Deere in my way.
Yeah.
But
You'll be out on your fishing boat later.
but you know the point I'm making. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
we are not wowed. I can't remember the last time I was wowed as far as service is concerned.
Well, so there's a couple things. So one of the things that was pioneered by Bruce, my business partner, is he has this
Sure.
thing called, he really likes the CEO model. And I don't know if this is something Bruce had picked up or Bruce had come up with himself, but the idea is really simple, right? You have customers, you have employees, and then you have ownership. Okay. You basically are the last in line. And I've kind of tweaked this a little bit. I don't think of it as much as owners for the CEO model. I think of it more like operations management, right? So you really have to realize that if you want to actually fix your company, the most important customer isn't the one that pays you directly. It's your internal customers,
It's the team.
yes, your employees are 100% your internal customers. And the reason for that is if you reach a point where you are not treating them like internal customers and you say, hey, and I see this all the freaking time, right? Well, I've got all of these drivers. They're all replaceable. The office staff is replaceable. I can always swap these people out and keep going. What's going to happen is you push that sentiment down from your O to your E. Now your employees feel that. What are they going to do? They're going to pass that down to your
To the
customers, to
customer.
your
Yeah.
clients, and now
Yeah.
your clients feel replaceable. One of the things that I found is that you can run two types of companies. We can focus on the number of trips we're doing, the amount of
Absolutely.
trips we're doing. As
Yep.
long as we execute, we get the trip done, we're good. The problem with that is you can execute a technically flawless trip. I don't care if it's a bus, I don't care if it's an EMT, taxi, limo, you shuttle. You pick it. You can execute the trip perfectly, but if the guy driving it has got, and I'm not making this up, I've seen it. If the guy driving it has got a ratty tag uniform, he could care less about who's in the vehicle. He's
Yeah.
just literally a guy driving it. I'm
Yep.
going to have no loyalty. I'm going to have no reason to pick you over anyone else. And even though the actual trip part, you got me from A to B perfectly, I've got no reason not to go with someone else. However, ironically enough, when I think of a type of work that is one that is probably the most thankless, that's not getting tips, that's actually supporting another mode of transportation, that's the most entertaining to me, is actually the shuttle drivers for the rental car companies. I will probably never see that driver again in my life unless
Mhm.
it's somewhere I go to a lot. They typically are not getting out of the driver's seat, right? And in most cases, you think of them driving back and forth. I can think of 3 drivers that in my mind are the epitome of a professional driver. Why? I remember one, and I wish I remember the city. I get on, he's got the radio turned very low. He's literally listening to BBC News. He welcomes every single person on. He helped them load their luggage onto the vehicle. He's there. He's ready. He's dressed to the nines. He's literally got a sweater on. You can see he's still got, even though he's wearing a shirt and tie, it's got a sweater over it. He could have very easily ditched the tie, but he's got the tie on. He's got the button-up shirt. He's got his sweater on. He looks professional. Absolutely great. Guess what? Made an impression on me. Only thing that kills me is I don't remember what rental car company it was, but I can tell you that's one of the top experiences I've had. Now, put that same type of personality, that same type of person in a position where, hey, now we've got an experience we can tie it to. I'm going to go with them every single time. The problem that you run into in their world is, guess what? He was probably going to 4 or 5 different rental car companies. He probably wasn't tied to a single one. There's no opportunity there. If you would have taken that same person and he was a motor coach driver, I guarantee you every single group he drove would have been begging to have him back, would have been begging for the loyalty. The biggest thing that I think is going to set apart any of these companies is that they have to create an experience that comes down the line, right? And as the owner, you have to create that same experience for your employees. And I can tell you right now, that's the biggest difference.
So how many of them, so talk to me about, internally, when I was quoting Danny Myers, he talks about personal dignity.
Yeah.
I have a client that I haven't done work for him in a while. Back in the day, I visited him and he's like, geez, I've got a terrible driver turnover problem. And I don't know why. Well, one day when I was in his office, I actually had to use the bathroom and I had to go past the dispatch department. And his general manager was screaming at the top of his lungs.
Just dressing someone down.
And there was a group of drivers, kind of at the window kind of a thing. And I went back to I said, I know exactly why you're losing drivers.
Yeah.
And he's, well, what do you mean? I said, I just watched so-and-so just literally crucify, swearing like a sailor in front of 4 or 5 drivers. And I said, what about praise in public, reprimand in private? And his excuse to me was, well, that guy's been in the business forever. He knows how to dispatch in New York and Connecticut, and I can't get rid of him. I'm like, then you're always going to have problems. And to this day, that guy is constantly having issues. It's a revolving door. I think this personal dignity thing, as far as having a person who enjoys creating hospitality and enjoys creating experiences for customers, I think it's a big part of it. I think it's a big part of it.
I think it's deeper than that. And here's my thing, and here's what I've learned from all of the companies I've visited, right? I've lost count. The companies that truly care about their employees create environments that don't put up with that kind of stuff. Okay.
So they don't tolerate it.
Well, but their teams don't tolerate it. Okay.
Right.
So I had one of my first jobs that I had was corporate. And when I was growing up, I figured out very early on that I had a mouth on me. So call centers, I mean, surprise, surprise, right? Yeah. Me?
Really?
A mouth on me? What? No. So I went to go work in call centers, right? I started working in call centers when I was like 16, 17. And probably into my 20s, that was before I changed career paths. It was an easy way to pay bills, right? When I was in school, when I was at KU, it's an easy job. But one of the things that I found when I started managing my first team was I got personally bonused on my team's performance, right? So the way my team performed, I got bonused on. I don't know why I decided to do this, but I decided that if I got the bonus for my team's performance, even though they all got their own commissions, I felt like I needed to share that with them in a way. And so what we would do is if everybody on my team all hit their goals, we would have a party. Now, Kansas City, of course, it was Jack Stack. And they knew, right, if the first or fifth of the month, I don't remember what I did anymore, but I had a Jack Stack hat that I'd gotten from our first day catering. So for those that don't know, Fiorella's Jack Stack is one of the more better known barbecues here in town. We won't debate who the best is, but it's kind of,
Okay.
if you've heard of one, you've probably heard of Jack Stack or maybe Joe's. It's kind of one of the big names in town. And so I'd wear a Jack Stack hat and we'd celebrate, and every other team in that building would be jealous and they'd want to come because I would literally order the absolute best everything, best catering package they had. And I remember I had a gal working for me and she just was not motivated. She did not want to do it. She was not to the point where she was at risk of getting let go. She was heading that direction. But I had built a team that very much was all about, hey, our culture, before I even knew what culture was, I'd accidentally created this culture where we're all in the boat rowing together. We're all trying to hit this target. And so what happens is this girl's just not hitting the target. And everybody is trying to coach her. Everybody is trying to help her. Everybody is trying to get her there because everybody wants to hit the goal. And this isn't even in a negative way. It's, hey, this is what we do. We're the team that hits the goal. We're the team that has the catering. We're the team that everyone wants to be like. And I remember it got to a point where I was worried that she was going to keep going downhill and I was going to have to let her go. And she came to me one day and she goes, hey, I don't think this job is right for me. And I said, why? She's like, I'm not hitting goal. I'm not doing that. I said, well, hey, I can coach you. We can get you there. Look, it's just not right for me. She had figured out that the culture, the fit, the expectation, she wasn't going to go the extra mile. She wasn't going to be that person. And she weeded herself out.
Yep.
What I see, and I guarantee that in the situation you brought up, this is part of the issue, is I see this fear of, like you said, he knows the business. He knows what he's doing. He's this, he's that. What is not happening there is in this scenario that I gave, my team, the peers put the pressure on and she let herself go. The thing that would have happened if that team wouldn't have peer pressured her and she hadn't have felt that that wasn't the right fit and weeded herself out, it would have been my job to let her go and remove her. Because if I would have let that continue,
sure, you would have brought the whole team down.
Darn right.
So what do you do then? You hit this, normally, and I hate to say it this way, but when I'm reviewing somebody's company, that's not what I focus on, right? I don't focus, but you can't help but notice things, right? What do you do when it's a member of your management team that is hurting the team's performance? If our goal is to create a memorable experience on every trip, how do you deal with the manager who just doesn't, he does this in meetings and he'll just smile up and down that this is a great idea, let's do this, and then he doesn't support it? What do you do when the person is not rowing in the right direction?
So here's where things change depending on where you're at in your career and where you're at in your business. All right. Because if you're in a business where you have management below you and the way you reach your team is through the management, there's a couple problems. I worked for someone that had me managing a team and would go around me and directly address the team.
Oh, can't do that.
And I can tell you it was hell for me. I could never get anything done. And I lost the respect of the team, not because they didn't respect me, but because they knew they could literally go around me and go straight to that person. And I left. Now, what should be happening is if you're at a level where management is managing people, you should be evaluating the performance of those people and holding that manager accountable as if they had done it. Because at the end of the day, if you are going down the chain, right? If I'm the owner and I've got a chauffeur manager and I've got all of these issues with my chauffeurs, it's up to that chauffeur manager to fix it. Now, here's where it gets really tricky, right? And it could be if you're in a bus company, driver manager, whatever, pick your term. Where it gets really tricky is a lot of times people try to do that, but they hog tie the driver manager or the chauffeur manager or the hiring manager.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll give you a great example. They say, hey, you need to clean this up. Well, hey, we need a clean house. I've got 5 guys that need to get rid of. No way in hell you're getting rid of those 5 guys or gals. I got to have butts and seats. I can't have you just firing people to get rid of them. We can't get rid of John. He's been with us for 20 years. Well, we can't get rid of Susie. Susie's going to cover the trips that nobody else wants. So now you've got someone that you're trying to hold accountable that can't weed out the bad apples. And now you're wondering why you've got a problem. Now, the other thing is you got to give people the opportunity to straighten out. So I'll give you the example that you gave of the person dressing down. Let's say I'm the owner of that company and I walk by and I see that person dressing everyone down. The worst thing I can do is walk into that room and dress that person down because I've completely justified the behavior. The worst thing I can do is catch that person mid-sentence and say, hey, yeah, real quick, come here, right? Because now I've taken away all of their ability to address that team because it's, oh, you got caught yelling at us, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait till after that and I'm going to go talk to that person and go, hey, what happened on the dispatch floor today? Is that how we're addressing them? Is it? And then you've got to do a couple things. One, you've got to tell them how you want it handled or how it should have been handled. And then 2, you brought up inspect what you expect.
In private.
Absolutely. And I would in no way, shape, or form want anyone to know this conversation took place, right? Other than me and the person I'm addressing. Unless there's someone else that is directly involved with that. But at that point, you've basically, with that person, it'd be, hey, look, you can't go in there and rip them a new one. And the most important thing is why. This is the part that everybody screws up. All right. They've done studies and studies and studies. The why matters, right? And my favorite example, I tell people all the time, imagine that we install a red button in all of your vehicles and you tell every single one of your drivers, you got to push the red button every 10 minutes. While you're driving, you have to push the red button every 10 minutes. It's going to beep. You have to push it. Everybody listening to this podcast is like, I know the 3 people that are never going to push the freaking button, right? They're never going to push the button. No matter what I do, I'm never going to be able to get them to push the button. Now, let's change the conversation. You have a red button, you got to push it every 10 minutes because we have a new safety system. And if you don't push the red button at the exact 10-minute mark, 3 seconds later, it's going to apply the brakes as hard as it can, regardless of speed, even if you're going down the highway. Now they're all going to push the red button. Some of them are even pushing the red button every 10 seconds, just in case, because they don't want the brakes going off. But that little because or why, or here's the reasoning, here's what I'm thinking, instead of because I say so, is the biggest
that's
difference.
Gone. That's gone completely. You know, what you're saying, it all flows downhill. And to me, you cannot have a company that has superior customer service and a hospitality mentality unless it flows from the top, goes through the management team, and is reinforced every single day. You know, it's what in the book Setting the Table, it's what Danny Meyer calls constant, gentle pressure. And I think you hit upon something. I think today's employee needs to hear, they need to hear the why. They need to hear the why. Somebody asked me to come up and do a speech at their company, and I'm believe it or not, I'm gonna go north and do that on a Saturday for them. Well, they're a great client. On a Saturday, they're having an all hands meeting, and I encourage every operator, regardless of size, to take the opportunity, because it's a new year, to hit a reset. Now, we joked that I moved into a new office. My old office, I felt a little stagnant. My old office was too dark, and I wanted a big window. And, you know, listen, we had a good year last year, and, you know, we went up from $385 a month to $505, so it's okay. Anyway, I encourage every operator to take the first new year and write up what customer-facing changes or goals and objectives that they want to see. We take people through a financial planning, business planning, financial planning. But I think that we have, as an industry, because we are so focused on getting from A to B, and, you know, we are focused on the fact that there's a lot of competition and disruption, et cetera, that I think we have missed the opportunity to wow the customer every single day. You've said that, and I see it. I see it in big companies and small. What do you do when the problem is the owner?
Nothing.
What do you do
You
when the
can,
problem is the operator?
there's nothing you can do below the owner if the problem is the owner, if they're not going to let you change it, right? People don't quit jobs, people quit managers. Now let me make some.
Wait a minute. Say that. It would say this.
People don't quit jobs, people quit
Yep.
managers, right?
Yep.
Let me clarify a couple things. So everything we've talked to up at this point is the foundation that it's built on, okay? Now, what we haven't talked about is that you have to teach them what the expectation is. You have to show them. You have to be able to teach them how to think about it. But my dad was a former Cobra attack helicopter pilot, an engineer, kind of my inspiration, probably one of the people I look up most to in the world, right? And one of the things that he taught me very early on, and his favorite way to say it was, you don't go to school to learn the job you're going to do. You learn the job on the job. Doesn't matter if you're going to be a doctor, doesn't matter if you're going to be an engineer, it doesn't matter what you're going to do, right? Somebody had to do the first new type of surgery, right?
Sure.
Somebody had to figure out the first new thing. So what they had to learn first was, how do doctors think? What's my thought process? My big thing, and he was an engineer and he would always teach me is, you're an engineer. So let's say you have a part wear out on a vehicle. Instead of just saying, oh, well, that part's worn out, we slap a new one on, an engineer's thought process is, why did that wear out?
Right.
What can I do to prevent the next one from wearing out?
Yep.
And how do I look at the whole system? This we're talking about is that thought process of, if you want to fix your customer experience, you have to think like someone that understands the whole customer experience. And that's where that whole CEO model comes in, right? Even though you're an owner, you're management, I have to treat my team in a way that's going to then flow down. Now, where this comes in is, you have to have a culture in place where you are treating each other with respect. You're treating. Now, does that mean that when it hits the fan and you've got, Super Bowl in your lap, or you've got whatever big event you deal with in your lap, that you can't just jump on the phone and be like, hey, I need this here, I need this there? Absolutely. And there is a time and a place that you're still pleasant, you're still good to work with, but it becomes very operationally focused. But I'm going to quote Charlie Grimm, which I got to tell you is another one of the people I really look up to.
Mhm.
Charlie and
Yep.
Athena, at least for me, are personal mentors.
Anchorage, Alaska,
BAC and Alaska Medical Transportation.
BAC, chauffeured transportation, and then Alaska Medical.
Yep. So they've got, and I apologize, Charlie or Athena, if I got that wrong, but they've got their Alaska Medical Transportation and they've got
Sure.
BAC. But one of
Sure.
the most important quotes, and I will never forget, I was up there. They were our pilot program for the entry-level driver training. Charlie and I are sitting in their break room and we were talking. He says, you can't make a withdrawal unless you've made a deposit. And you should
I
always
agree.
make more deposits than withdrawals. And he
Yep.
shared with me a story of how he had a customer that they needed a vehicle. They had all this stuff going on. They didn't know what they're going to do. And he goes, man, I said, hey, it was a spring. I had my convertible. I said, hey, just take my convertible, right? You just don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of it here. You guys I'll let you borrow it. Just go, I'll take care of it. But it's that same mentality with employees, with customers, with everybody. If you look at how involved they are in the community, when I talked to Athena and I were chatting back and forth on text, and she was telling me how for Christmas, they're doing a big thing for their employees, right?
Yep.
It's making those deposits before you can make a withdrawal. Now, that said, that is the foundation that you're building on. That's usually the part that fails, because just like I said, the why, I go and I see a lot of companies where they teach people what the customer service is. They teach them everything to do. The person knows the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. They know everything they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But unlike Charlie and Athena, unlike others that we've talked about, that have the right, mentality, the right deposit, the right culture, it's, well, it doesn't really matter if I do it that way or if I just get them in the car, because
They know the notes, but they can't make the harmony. They
Yeah.
know the words, but they can't create the story.
Exactly.
And I think, bringing it full circle, I honestly think that the fact that customer service is a dying art, hospitality now is, I mean, high quality hospitality is few and far between now. I won't share, the specific Marriott that I go to, but I have made the comment. I made a comment to the general manager, and I would say, what passes now for this is a five-star hotel. What passes now for hospitality wouldn't have been tolerated back then. And his mentality is he needs people to come to work. I get it. But I do think from a cultural perspective, something is watered down. I think if you water down what your expectations are, you're basically giving in. And to me, you're giving into mediocrity. Okay. You're giving into mediocrity.
But all right, let's close the loop completely then, because we started by talking about the culture of the country and possibly the global culture. Let's close that loop completely.
Are we going to blame it on Trump? Are we blaming it on Trump?
Jeez, this guy. Why are you making it political? Jeez, like a single president could have that much influence. I think it's deeper than that. I think what we've seen, and there's lots and lots of talk about this. There's lots of it going on. How many times do you see a couple out to dinner together and both of them are on their phone? They're literally clearly on a freaking date and they're on their phone, right? Sure. How many times do you see people walking down the street and they've got their phone out? We have as a society, the way that we interact, the way that we do things has fundamentally changed. Now, depending on how you want to look at it, and I'm not trying to blame anything on generations. This is not a blame game. This is a change of the world, right? Mm-hmm. You go talk to someone about what it was like before cars were invented. Things fundamentally change. The internet, all of these pieces, social media, everything has fundamentally changed the human interactions that we have. The idea of transportation, the idea of these pieces have changed. For example, it used to be that it was a suit and tie affair to go fly on an aircraft.
Absolutely. I mean, look, it was suit and tie to have Sunday dinner we used to go out to dinner at a restaurant on Sunday and the whole family used to get dressed up.
Yeah. And look, I'm not going to lie to you. The last time when we were in church, right? We were in church recently and I looked around and the number of people that didn't have what I was taught are, for me, Sunday, when I go in there with my nice golf pants and my nice polo and I'm looking like I'm going to go golfing, sometimes I feel a little guilty because I'm like, that's not really your Sunday best, bud. You really should be dressing up a little more. And then I look around and I'm like, shorts and t-shirts.
I don't disagree with you. I think the whole world has become more casual.
Insanely so.
But I think and it's also, to your point, it's very transactional. But I do believe, just like my favorite five-star restaurant, they all know my name still. I mean, even if I haven't gone there in a while, if I fly to Tampa, they still remember who I am. The manager does. So I think there's an opportunity now more than ever to make a positive, lasting impression by doing more, by giving more, those wow experiences. And I don't know, as an industry, to me, it's a tough thing to say the industry's got to do that. I just look at all my successful customers. They all have certain things in common. Number one, they're all financially, they're looking at their financials with us every single month. And they're looking at their KPIs every single month. Their equipment is always pristine. They're in the top 1/3 as far as pricing in their market. But the best of the best have a continuous culture of excellence that I think you got to drive home every single day. I don't think you can make it a once or twice a year training thing. I think excellence is an every single day. As Danny Meyer said, it's a gentle, continuous pressure on the organization to continually reinforce excellence. It's interesting to me that we always quote Ritz-Carlton on this podcast because Bruce Bruce Heinrich
Bruce
from
has got the
Leader. I
background.
mean,
Yeah.
that's the two of us. That's what binds Bruce and I together is our background and actual, love of the Ritz-Carlton system. Do you know that they really doubled down or tripled down on the creation of that system in the 80s? The Ritz-Carlton was 100 years old.
Oh yeah.
And the original owner, I would murder his name, but the original owner, the founder basically said, look, we've got our eye off the ball. So this is what we're going to do. And he created this whole system, the gold standard, and he empowered every single employee. Back then it was you can spend $500 without any
Without
management approval.
asking.
Now it's 2000. So, I would encourage every operator. We are working with every operator on what their financial goals are for 2026, but I would encourage every operator to look at what are your hospitality goals and what are your goals to make sure that we wow clients, not just at the time of sale, but we wow clients with every single experience. I mean, I, I've got to think that if Chick-fil-A can do it, I hate to say it, anybody can do it because, they're dealing with teenagers in a lot of cases. But I do think we have an opportunity. It creates a competitive advantage to deliver that wow moment. And it can't be just every once in a while. And we have to do it internally. We have to reward it when we see it happen.
Look, I think there's a couple things that I think about when I think about this. Okay. The first is that the culture you define is the way that it's going to come out the other end. And the only way that you are able to do that is that you have to be willing to fight and defend your culture. And that means
Sure.
from threats internal and threats external, right? Believe it or not, this is one of those fights that is more internal than external. It is, and we could go on for another 2 or 3 hours, right? I've talked about this at length before in my sessions. This is something where the way that you define it, what you essentially allow them to do, you're condoning. So let's say we had that same scenario we had earlier where we see someone, and let's say this time, instead of dressing down the dispatch, you see them, and I watched this happen, right? I watched someone in front of me dress down a driver at an airport. They had just started. They were out there with the owner. The owner saw him, and he went and he ripped that guy a new one. Hey, you're at the wrong place. Not, hey, how's the first day going? Do you mind if I give you some pointers? I think, it looks like you're lined up wrong. Let me give you some pointers. I want to make sure that we've got you doing it right. He went over to that driver who just started. He ripped him a new one. I kid you not, that driver drove straight back to the office, walked in, threw the keys at dispatch, got in their car, went home, left, and
Yeah.
never came back. And
Yeah.
I will tell you, I don't know the whole story, but literally it was the guy's first day. The owner and I happened to be at the airport. We saw the guy. The guy was at a place. He went over. He even knew it was the guy's first day and ripped him a new one right in front of me, who I had no idea who the driver was. The only reason I knew it was first day is I got told afterwards. So I think if it's top down, there's not much to be done. So if you're worried that's you got to take a hard look in the mirror. If you are management, if you're the levels below, you've got to make sure that everything below your level is happening like it's supposed to and it's there. Because like I said, you can teach someone everything they need to do. If the culture and the why is not there, it doesn't matter. They're going to treat people the way you treat them. That's simple.
No question
So-
about it. No question about it. And the other misnomer, we'll just leave it with this, is it's not always about, actually, it's not about the money. I mean, surveys after survey, and I've seen it with my own clients that when I look at and say, wow, their driver labor is low as a percentage of total income, but they have zero turnover. Okay.
Yep.
It's just the way the culture is. I mean, Randy Allen did it with James Limousine down in Richmond, Virginia.
Yep.
I've stepped into other clients of mine that have the wall that recognize all chauffeurs. So to me, if you're going to be striving to grow your business just by doing more and more trips from point A to point B, to me, it's more important to look at the culture, take a look at 2026, look at what your goals are. Yes, absolutely. Financial goals, profit goals, extremely important. But how can we put a fine point on the hospitality that we deliver as operators? Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that differentiates us. It really is. We've talked about it endlessly that Uber Black drivers are driving, they're not making any money, but they're driving Escalades. They're driving brand new Suburbans. So I think as operators out there, that should be as important of a goal. I can't believe I'm saying that, as their financial and profit goals for 2026 is how can we put a finer point on hospitality? It's not just about, look, we have a 94%, a 96% on-time performance rate, which is great, which is terrific.
Yeah.
But how can we wow the client every single time? That's a challenge, I think, that is a good challenge for the first part of the year for everybody to think about.
I agree. And as we kind of bring this to a close, I think in my mind, what I would say is I don't care what kind of company you are listening to this. I think that it's important that you think about that from the standpoint of, I want to wow that actual passenger. And if that passenger is not the one that booked or interacted or dealt with my company, I want everyone to be wowed, right? I want every single one that makes up that client base, right? Beyond just the passenger to be wowed. I can't think of a better way to wrap this up. I got to say, I don't know that this is where I saw us going, but I think it's ultimately where it has to go. I think, as always, we want everyone to like and subscribe. By the way, we haven't brought it up yet, so I'm going to bring it up now. Ken, that's a great shirt you're wearing, and that coffee mug you've been
Don't
using.
you like this shirt?
For
Don't you
those
like
of you
this?
that are listening and that can't see the beauties that Ken has got a beautiful branded Ground Transportation Podcast mug and an incredible shirt. I think at some point we may have to do some merch here.
We might have to do some merch. The other piece of the puzzle I want to talk to people about today is I want you to subscribe.
Yes.
I love the fact that you listen and that you watch, but I want you to subscribe because we at some point, this is going to have to be something that breaks even, maybe even makes a shilling or two.
For those that aren't aware, driving transactions and PAX training are personally, well, not personally, the company is, right?
This.
Ken and I are essentially 100% funding this, which is why it's brought to you ad free, right? I mean,
Correct.
Don't get me wrong. We have our little spiels about ourselves in here, but we are 100% funding this one out of pocket.
Please subscribe. And I love the luminaries in the industry that send me emails saying they listen all the time, but we'd like you to subscribe. We'd like every single listener to subscribe so that at some point, while our views are through the roof, for some reason, people look at the subscription number as, when they want to advertise with us. So we want you to subscribe. We also want you to tell us what you'd like to hear. What would you like to be subject matter for an upcoming episode? And this has been the Ground Transportation Podcast. We will have merchandise at some point on the website. I'm sure John will take care of that. And James, it's been fantastic.
Best part of my week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Ground Transportation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about PAX Training and to contact James, go to paxtraining.com. And for more information about driving transactions and to contact Ken, go to drivingtransactions.com. We'll see you next time on the Ground Transportation Podcast.